All right, I think it's time to get started here. So I'm Josh Kessler. I'm a program manager at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. I'm not sure if Bev Craig is on the line, but I think most of you have been in touch with her about our program. So she just asked me to put on a webinar today about our commercial scale air source heat pump and VRF program, talk about the incentives and the process for applying to the program. So I figure I'll walk through the slides and then I'll open up to questions at the end and maybe once or twice throughout the presentation. So gonna get started now. Thanks. A bit about this program. First of all, it's funded through the Renewable Energy Trust, which is the main source of funding for the Clean Energy Center's programs. The Renewable Energy Trust Fund is funded through a small surcharge on electricity bills. It's separate from the much larger utility-run MassCEC efficiency programs, but there's some overlap in terms of what we incentivize. So projects, just to clarify, can receive both MassCEC and MassSave incentives unless you're going through the LEAN program and you're getting full funding for the project through MassSave. And so our focus historically has been on developing a clean energy industry and reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the Commonwealth, which is similar to, but a little different from the MassSave programs. In terms of the clean heating programs, MassCEC in August 2015 committed $30 million over a 5-year period to fund the clean heating and cooling programs. Initially, we started with our residential programs, and then our commercial air source heat pump program launched, covering just mini splits in August 2016. And last May, we expanded that to include VRF. This past June 2018, we committed an additional $18 million to fund these programs. And we're currently expecting that funding for air source heat pumps and VRF should last through the end of 2019. That's commercial air source heat pumps. And most of you probably know by now that the changes to our commercial and VRF program are slated to take effect on February 1st, 2019. So if you get your applications in before then, as long as they're fairly complete, then we should be able to fund the incentives at the current funding levels. And I'll go through what those changes actually are momentarily. To give you just a very high-level overview of the incentives, they are prescriptive incentives based on the heating capacity of the compressors or the condensing units. The incentives are capped at 1.8 million BTU per hour of capacity, which is roughly enough to cover about a 60,000 square foot facility. For mini split projects, up until February 1st, the projects will be capped at 93,750 for standard projects, including standard multifamily projects, and then for affordable housing projects, they're capped at 225,000. For VRF, it's capped at up to $180,000 per project, or $250,000 for affordable housing. And we do, one important thing to note is we do require pre-approval, so you have to submit your application beforehand. And part of the idea is to help you just ensure that you get financing for these projects, and then just have more confidence that the money is going to be there once you've actually built the systems. And we'll get into more detail on requirements for training, eligible equipment, project location, all of that. So the way the grant formula actually works, we'll get to the money first. For anything submitted prior to January 31st or earlier, for VRF, the incentives are based on the heating capacity at 17 degrees, that's rated capacity at 17 degrees. And it's in increments of 12,000 BTU per hour, which is the equivalent to 1 ton of capacity. I'll just go through the affordable housing numbers here, figuring that that's who is on the line, is my understanding. So for VRF systems without heat recovery, that's standard VRF heat pumps, it's $1,600 per ton of capacity. For heat recovery systems, it's $2,000 per ton of capacity, and again, those are capped at $250,000 per site. I think we went through these limits already. Now, and just one other thing to note, the new incentive levels for affordable housing applications submitted after January 31st will be $1,200 for heat pumps and $1,600 for heat recovery systems. So for mini splits, they're based on, for single head or one-to-one units where you have one outdoor compressor and one indoor air handling unit. They're based on the number of units installed, number of outdoor compressors. For multi-head systems, it's based on the it's per ton. So, and it's per ton of maximum heating capacity, sorry, at 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, those are capped at 1.8 million BTU per hour. So for affordable housing, it's $1,500 per unit currently for single head systems, or per ton of capacity for multi-heads. And that's actually, that works out to $225,000 for a 150-ton system, or 150 units. And just one thing to note, well, I'll get to the program changes right here. So effective February 1st, our commercial scale air source heat pump program will become known as the VRF program. So that will include all VRF systems will apply through this. That includes single family VRF systems along with multifamily and any size. Mini split projects will not be eligible under the VRF program, but they will still be eligible under our residential and small commercial air source heat pump program. And those projects will be capped at $25,000 for commercial projects or affordable housing. The cap is $25,000 regardless of size. And there is no more pre-approval for those projects. So they'll just apply through our online portal after the fact, like any other mini split project. State and federal entities will not be eligible anymore. Municipal entities will still be eligible, but we're eliminating the higher tiered incentives for public and nonprofit projects. So these facilities will just get the same incentive as private entities. So the new incentive levels will be for VRF, the standard grant will be $600 for private projects or municipal projects, $600 per ton, or $1,000 per ton for heat recovery units that do simultaneous heating and cooling, and then that's capped at $150,000. And then affordable housing will be $1,200 per ton for heat pumps or non-heat recovery systems, and $1,600 per ton for heat recovery systems. So the way the process works, again, the projects need to be pre-approved. So you'll submit an application, and usually the application documents are prepared by a combination of the building owner and the system designer, potentially with the architect or other project manager involved. Usually we'll have a little bit of back and forth, answer any questions that you have about the program and the application process, and then we'll approve the application. It might take up to a couple weeks to get all the 2 to 3 weeks to get all the approvals in place once all of your documentation is complete and ready to go. We will reserve the funds and issue you an award letter to basically official notification that we've reserved the funds for the project. Then you'll have up to a period of time to submit milestone 1, which is completing any final changes to the design, finalizing the design, and then ordering the equipment. You'll then have up to 1 year if it's a retrofit project, or 2 years for new construction between the time that we reserve the funds and the time that you order the equipment and submit that documentation. If it goes longer, please just contact us in advance and we'll see if we can extend the deadline. So then we'll pay out the first 30% of the grant once you've ordered the equipment. The balance of the grant will be paid once you've completed construction and done what's called a manufacturer-assisted startup, where somebody from a factory rep, somebody from the manufacturer, or an authorized representative comes out and tests the system, make sure it's operating properly, everything is installed properly. Then you'll send us the documentation, the invoices, and you'll have an additional year from the time that you've ordered the equipment to actually complete the project. One note, we can approve the applications based on a schematic design, and if there are any changes to the design after the fact, that's fine. Just send us the new design drawings or any changes to the units that you're going to install, and we will update the grant accordingly. And if you lock in the current levels, the pre-February levels, you'll lock in those pre-February levels for the life of the project, subject to funding availability. Next, actually, before I get into the more detailed eligibility requirements, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to either unmute yourself if you're able to, or to type questions, which I think you should be able to do. All right, haven't seen any questions yet, so hopefully that's a good sign and you can actually type questions if you want to. But if you do have any questions, I'll open it up again at the end. So getting into the details of qualifications. First of all, for system designers and installers. For designers, so this is only a role for VRF systems. For Minisplits, it's not, we don't have a designer role. Often it's the contractor doing a design for a design build project, let's say. But for VRF, we want to make sure that the designer has a PE license, usually in mechanical engineering, and 8 hours of manufacturer training within the past 5 years, and it's for the manufacturer brand that's being installed. That can be met through a combination of people on the design team. So it could be one person has a PE license and then another systems engineer on the team has gone through the training, although ideally it's the same person. And then what we also see a lot of times is distributor reps that meet the qualifications for the program will sign up as the designer and then assist the team with the design. But again, ideally, we would like to see somebody on the engineering team actually involved, get the training and submit the certifications to us. Installers, we want to see for Minisplits, 4 hours of manufacturer training in the past 5 years, or for VRF, 16 hours of manufacturer training. It's a little bit more complex product. And then of course, either a designer or installer, they need to sign the agreement and submit that to us. If especially the design team is having a difficult time meeting the requirements, but the manufacturer team believes that they're qualified to do the design, the manufacturer can request a waiver on their behalf. And for installers, especially we see this all the time for plan and spec projects, if you don't have an installer on board at the start of at the time of application, that's fine. You can select them later and just let us know who it is before you submit your payment request. Other eligibility requirements. First of all, for any project funded by MassCEC, typically it has to be located in a community that pays into the Renewable Energy Trust. So that includes any investor-owned utility territory, so National Grid, Eversource, or Unitil, or one of the 5 municipal light plants that is paying into the Renewable Energy Trust. And those links, so we can circulate these slides afterwards, and those links have a list of the 5 municipal lights. In terms of efficiency requirements for the units that are being installed, for standard VRF systems, that's any system above 65,000 BTU per hour of capacity, they are tested under they're tested under AHRI 1230, and they need to meet the current ASHRAE commercial code, basically. So that's ASHRAE 90.1-2016. And all units that meet that code should be listed in the online AHRI directory, and you can download the specification sheets there and just check that the units qualify. For small-scale VRF units, those are any VRF units that are below 65,000 BTU per hour of capacity, cooling capacity. They need to meet, they need to have an HSPF of 10, a SEER rating of 17, and an EER of 11. And we may be revisiting that EER rating in January. And then for mini splits, they just need to meet the current NEEP cold climate air source heat pump specification, and that's listed in our program manual. Now, in terms of sizing requirements, and then, sorry, they also need to be on a qualified product list, and I'm not going to get into detail on that, but if you do have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. In terms of sizing requirements, this is just a requirement for new buildings participating in the VRF program. We don't have a requirement for mini splits or for retrofits, but VRF systems need to meet 100% of both the heating and cooling load for new construction. That applies to the zones that are conditioned by the VRF system. So if there are, say, hallways or hard to reach areas where it's a relatively minor, or ventilation load, or it's a relatively minor portion of the load, those portions of the building are exempt. But for the most part, we want to make sure that it is meeting the full heating and cooling load. You can have redundant boilers in the case of buildings where the building owner needs that, or you need that in order to get up to code. And again, for retrofits or for mini splits, we just want to make sure that you do have proper heating and, well, proper heating equipment for the building. So we just want to make, you can have supplemental heating and cooling systems, that's fine. We just want to make sure that there's enough to condition the space. Controls, for VRF systems, we want to have a central internet connected controller for any unit above 20 tons or 240,000 BTU per hour of capacity. And that's fairly standard, but we want to make sure you have that. Again, manufacturer-assisted startup is required for all VRF projects. For mini-split projects, just standard startup procedures is fine. There doesn't need to be a manufacturer rep. And for affordable housing projects specifically, in order to qualify as an affordable housing project, at least half of the housing units in the building need to be zoned to meet less than 80% of state median income. So in terms of what documentation we require, first of all, there is an Excel-based application form. You can download this from our website. It captures basic project information, contact information, along with the VRF or mini-split product unit list, the list of units being installed, basically. Then once you plug in the list of units that are being installed, it will calculate the grant amount based on the capacity of those units. That's typically submitted by some combination of the system owner and the designer would compile that. Then there's a project narrative where we're asking for some more qualitative project information, a good amount of information on the design, plus some information on just why you're, what the decision-making process was, what you were focused on when you decided to go with a VRF system. So there's a Word template on our website. You just download that template and fill out the questions, or the responses to the questions. That's only required for systems that are above 240,000 BTU per hour or 20 tons. Smaller projects are exempt from that. Usually it's the designer filling that out, maybe with a little bit of input from the system owner. Then there's a system owner's agreement. Just our standard legal conditions. There's a Word file, you download it from our website and sign the agreement, that's it. Then for VRF projects, not for mini-splits, there is a design summary. So we'll accept either design drawings or output from the VRF manufacturer software. And basically we want to see a list of the both outdoor and indoor units that are being installed. The list of outdoor units should match what you've put on the application form. And then typically there would be a schematic drawing included also. And again, that's only for VRF, not for mini splits. The designer should be familiar with that. Then we also want to see a load calculation. Typically it's a block load for VRF. Although if you're doing single family residence, then maybe it would be just a peak load calculation, whatever is appropriate for the site. And for mini splits, typically we see 1 or 2 peak load calculations for representative zones. So if, let's say, it's a multifamily building with 1 bed, 2 bed, and 3 bed zones, we'd want to see a load calculation for each of those. And then if you're doing VRF for the common areas, let's say, then we might want to see an additional load calculation for the common area. AHRI rating sheets, you would just download those from the online AHRI directory. Again, that's for VRF only. Mini splits, if they're on our qualified product list, you should be fine. We want an electric bill for retrofits that would be submitted at application. For new construction, you could submit that once the project is built. And that's really for address verification and just making sure about the rate code. Nothing else. It's not for gathering energy data or anything like that. And then affordable housing verification, we talked about the requirement already. That's typically a deed restriction, although if you have something else, other basically legal proof that this is going to be an affordable housing site, that should be fine also. Resources that we make available on our website. First of all, our air source heat pump installer resources page. All the program documents are included there. That includes the program manual that lists in detail what all the requirements are, the application process, the grant amount, soup to nuts, everything about the program. There are also the application documents that you can download are all on that page. There's also a sample application that has been filled out. So that includes all of the application documents, the form, the narrative, the AHRI sheets, load calculations, everything. We also have a program fact sheet on that page that actually lists the grant levels for post February 1st, so not the ones that I shared today. And then we have some other resources also targeted more towards contractors. We have a Finding a Designer Installer resources page where it lists both all of the manufacturer and distributor reps for the major manufacturers, or one rep per manufacturer, along with a list of designers and installers who have signed up to participate in this program. We have the program fact sheet that I mentioned, so that summarizes the grant formula post February 1st, and then eligibility requirements and the application process. But really what I've presented here is a little bit more detailed. And then also for smaller scale projects or any mini split project after February 1st, you'd be applying through this online application portal. And again, for small scale projects or any project after February 1st, if it's mini splits, you would apply through that online portal after the project has already been completed. So that's all I had to share today. Oh, sorry, one thing that I neglected to include today was a description of the difference between VRF and mini splits. So really anything above 65,000 BTU per hour is typically considered VRF, but there's also the technical difference between mini splits and VRF is VRF. So for mini splits, the expansion valve is on the outdoor unit, whereas for mini splits, the expansion valve is located on each of the indoor units. And so that basically gives you a little bit better zonal control. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think this is what helps allow for longer refrigerant line sets that makes it a good fit for mid and high-rise buildings, basically larger buildings. So I'll open it up again to questions if you have any. Oh, okay. Okay, first, so the question is, having some issues with actually seeing this in the software here, but for small scale VRF, those are typically listed with COP at 47 and at 47 and 17, not HSPF. No, actually, sorry, that's incorrect. For small scale VRF units, they're actually rated the same way as mini splits. So they should have COP ratings at 47 and 17, as well as an HSPF rating and a SEER rating, which is the same way as mini splits are rated, whereas there are slightly different metrics for larger scale VRF. And so we're all right. We're trying to expand this window so that we can actually see the questions, because we're having a little bit of trouble with that right now. All right, well, thanks for signing on. I'm not seeing any other questions. If anyone has tried to speak, I can't hear you, so please do type your questions, but I'm not seeing anything. Oh, okay. You are now all unmuted, so feel free to speak all at once or not at all if you'd like. So we have another question. Are there plans to modify the efficiency requirements in the future, particular for ducted units in small scale VRF? Yeah, Doug, good question. So in our residential air source heat pump program, we go off of the NEEP cold climate heat pump cold climate heat pump specification, and the EER requirement for that is actually going down from 12.5 to 10 in January, and I think we're planning to align with that 10 number effective January 1st. Besides that, I think we're planning to keep the HSPF at 10 and the SEER at 17, but if you want to talk offline, probably with Bev about that, then that would be a good starting point. All right. Well, I'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but otherwise we will circulate these slides to everyone who signed up. Thanks for attending today, and good luck with all of your projects.